Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting of the School District of Waukesha Board of Education. I hereby call this meeting to order. I will point out before we get started, we have Mr. Harland excused for tonight's meeting. Otherwise, we have a quorum with 4 of the members present. We'll start with verification of meeting posting. Julie, can you please verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Thank you very much. We've now reached the section where citizens are provided the opportunity to speak. Do we have anyone that has signed up to speak tonight?
We do not.
We do not. Okay. With that, we can move into our action items section. We do have approval of the minutes. Would anyone care to discuss them, or I would entertain a motion for approval? Mrs. Voigt?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Voigt, seconded by Mr. Borowski. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the January 13th, 2025 Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. All right. That brings us into the policy discussion / information section. We have, I believe, 3 technical corrections. And Dr. Siebert can inform us as to those. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Siebert.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wad. Good evening, everyone. Our first technical correction applies to 3 policies in each of the employee groups. The policies are Patient Protection and the Affordable Care Act. And as you see in those policies, very minimal things, actions listed below as opposed to following, and then instead of financially wise, financially advantageous. Just some word corrections from Neola. The second one, if you don't mind, I'll just roll through those.
Sure.
Is 2271, the Early College Credit Program. That, I think most of you know, is a tremendous offering that we're very proud to have here in the School District of Waukesha. We have the most students, this is not in the policy, but I'll take the opportunity to brag. We have the most students in Waukesha County who participate in that program, which we're very proud of, and we have a tremendous partnership with multiple higher education institutions. In this policy, the technical correction is just writing the Universities of Wisconsin as opposed to UW system institutions and technical colleges, and that we shall operate in accordance with state law, which is already said. It's just a different way of saying it. And then it also talks about, instead of writing it grades 8 through 11, it says in the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grades. So just cleaning up the language, which is relatively straightforward. No changes in the meaning. And then the third one is Policy 2460, Programs for Students with Disabilities. And again, taking out the word disabled and replacing it with a disability, outlining that DPI means Department of Public Instruction, specifically stating the DPI Special Education Model Forms and Policies and Procedure Manual versus Handbook, and then rather than say the board and district supports, it says the board and administration supports. So relatively straightforward and clean there as well. So that would conclude the technical corrections for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Siebert. Mr. Brooks.
Thanks. I just want to throw out a comment on one of the technical corrections on Policy 2271, Early College Credit Program. And Mr. Watt, if I veer off procedurally, feel free to rein me in.
Sure.
I know technical corrections have a little kind of funky different set of rules for them, but I wanted to point out with the change to the Universities of Wisconsin from University of Wisconsin system, and I would actually throw this out here as a suggestion to revert it back to the original University of Wisconsin system institutions for the simple reason that Universities of Wisconsin does not exist in state statutes. State Statute 3603 creates the system of institutions for higher learning as the University of Wisconsin system. So in state statute, it is referred to as UW system. So just for the sake of keeping our policy consistent with state statute, I would recommend reverting that portion back to it if we're able to.
Mrs. White?
And I had a question about that line as well. When you talk about universities of Wisconsin, are the technical colleges included under that umbrella? You know, where the original statement saying the University of Wisconsin systems and technical colleges, et cetera, I thought that was clearer to me about what,
Okay.
you know, educational facilities we're talking about having partnerships with.
That's fair.
Yeah, as I reviewed it, I had the same question around technical colleges. I don't believe technical colleges are part of
they have their own.
the universities of Wisconsin as they're defined today, right?
I think that was Neola's intention with this, but I understand the discussion and your perspective, yes.
So let me just clarify something. So the language, the universities of Wisconsin, is language proposed by Neola to cover all, accredited secondary institutions in the state?
That's our understanding. That being said, I have no problem keeping it how it is either. I guess from your perspective, Mr. Wad, would you suggest we just change it administratively, or would you like to bring this back and have the committee talk about it in March? Because I think we could do it either way.
It seems fairly straightforward to me. I tend to agree with Mr. Brooks that I think I'd like us to keep the language consistent with how the university system is defined in the statutes.
Sure.
And seeing as though technical colleges are not part of the University of Wisconsin system, I'm not sure I'm comfortable striking that either now that I look at it. So
Sure.
I don't know how everyone else feels, but I think if we just reverted that language back to what was there, we would be fine. And then we could, and then just make the rest of the technical corrections that are listed here, I think would be suitable.
Julie and I will do that.
All right?
No problem at all. No, thanks for bringing it up. Good points.
Yep, thank you. Mrs. White?
My second question is, and I think the other technical corrections are fine.
Oh, good.
I just have a question, if we have any idea about how many students actually reach the 18 post-secondary credits. It'd be interesting to know how many credits are typically earned under this plan, because I know we've been very, very successful, and a lot of the opportunities are like through dual credit, where the student, like the ones I taught, the kids could take my accounting class or my entrepreneurship class or, you know, my computer applications class and get WCTC credit at the same time. So I was teaching the curriculum as they would teach it at WCTC, and the students would earn the dual credit in that context. So they didn't even have to pay for that opportunity. It was just the partnership agreement that we had arranged with WCTC.
Sure.
But, so they could earn those credits and the district not have to pay for them,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely. We can gather that, yeah,
Just
and
as-
I'll
like
share that.
Friday follow-up or
Yeah,
something.
for sure.
I just think it'd be
Certainly.
interesting to know how many, because a lot of kids talk about being able to jump into second semester of their freshman year, you know, because they've earned enough credits, you know, through the courses, you know, and through,
Just procedurally, though, I'm wondering if that's a topic better suited for teaching and learning.
I was going to talk to Molly, who coordinates those programs, and
Yeah,
she
me-
does come periodically to teaching and learning to talk about it.
Yeah, maybe that would be the.
So we could certainly
appropriate place to get
plan for that too, but I'm happy to gather that information and just share it.
Sure.
Because it's impressive
flyer.
information too, yeah, for sure.
All right. Anyone else? All right. That moves us to policy discussion and possible action. The first item is Policy 9120, Public Information Program. This has been a policy that we have been working through the last couple of months, and we brought back tonight for discussion and possible action. Dr. Siebert?
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Wad. I think you did a very nice intro. We've been through this policy a couple of times, and we've had some really good discussion, I think, at the committee level. And then in between committee meetings, when we put together the agenda, Julie and Mr. Wad and I have gone through it together. And so I think we strengthened based on our last meeting, we talked about the editing portion more specifically. And so It says meeting recordings will not be edited without the prior approval of the superintendent, board president, and presiding officer. In the event that the board president is also the providing officer, an officer of the board must authorize along with the superintendent and board president. We thought that reflected our conversation. And then edited recordings will be, as should they agree, right? Edited recordings will be documented as such and labeled edited recording. And then we added another piece on the bottom that says unedited versions of meetings will be maintained by the district. And that was actually Mr. Wad's suggestion, and we thought it was a strong one.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Siebert. Any comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion for adoption.
Also move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Borowski, seconded by Mr. Brooks. Any further discussion? If not, we can bring it to vote. All those in favor of adopting 9120 Public Information Program as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, passes 4-0. Thanks to the committee and Julie and Dr. Siebert for working through that one over the last couple of months. I think we got what we really were looking for out of that, so thank you very much. All right, next up, policy 8125, consultants, and this is a new policy. Dr. Siebert?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Wad. So you are correct. This is a new policy in our most recent update. And Neola has been doing some of this, breaking out pieces of policies into their own policy and then rescinding or deleting pieces from other policies. So this would be its own specific policy on consultants. Consultants are currently mentioned in our next policy, which is 1100, district organization, I should say. So this one provides a little more specificity around what consultants would be used for, and that they would have criminal history and background checks if they're working with students pursuant to 8120, our volunteer policy, and that approval of consulting contracts would be consistent with our purchasing policy, which is 6320. And then if you would approve this policy, the next discussion and possible action item would be the updating of 1100 district organization to take out specifically, primarily that piece about consultants.
Thank you, Dr. Siebert. Questions?
I have one.
Go ahead. Mr. Brooks.
It looks like it says here that district staff could also be hired in a consulting capacity, right? So serve basically two roles at once? Okay. I mean, I don't have any real concerns about that. Has that been done in the past, though?
I was trying to think through that myself as I read that. I can't think of an example since I've been here where that's happened, but I wouldn't, Mrs. Voigt, from your perspective, can you remember anything during your time?
The only thing I can think of is when we're working on our technology system, and there were the people that had been the original authors of that before they left.
Oh,
You know, at that point, he had retired, and we were trying to get him back as a consultant.
Sure.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have been the same concurrently.
right, right. Yeah, I think it's, to your point, I think it's okay to have it in there. I don't think it's going to be a regular occurrence, but in the instance that it would make sense, I think it's a good thing to have in there.
Yeah, it's probably nice to have the option, whether it happens or not. So, okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Borowski. Anyone else? All right, so I think the best way to do this would be to start with policy 8125, a new policy around consultants. I would entertain a motion for adoption.
I so move.
Moved by Mrs. White,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Brooks. Any further discussion?
Get you on the board.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. All right, and then that brings us to policy 1100, which Dr. Siebert explained. Dealt primarily with removing the language around consultants that was there and has now been moved into 8125. Anyone have any questions or concerns around the changes proposed for 1100?
If I may, Mr. Wad, there
Yes.
there is a little bit of clarity in terms of language in reordering some pieces in the
sure.
top of the policy too that I should just reference for you. Really talking about efficient use of resources and then changing the way that it talks about any reconfiguration of the grouping of grades, the use of building, or the revision of services as part of the district's instructional program shall require board approval. And that just replaces a couple of ways we set it differently in later parts of the policy. It also says any revision of the district's organizational structure shall require board approval, kind of reinforcing that. And that's obviously apparent, right? I mean, administratively, we wouldn't just say, well, we're going to do X, Y, or Z, right? We need your approval as elected officials. And then the other part, I think, is just making a little clearer statement that responsibility shall flow clearly from the superintendent through administrators to the operational personnel in a manner consistent with the district's plan of supervision of staff. And that, I think, is just cleaning up a little bit of the two deleted areas below it. And then the last part of the policy was around the consultants. So there are a few subtle changes, but I think it just overall is a little more cleaner language.
Yes, thank you for clarifying
Yeah,
that.
appreciate
Yeah, I
that.
should have done that earlier.
With that additional context, any questions specific to the proposed changes for policy 1100? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion for adoption.
Also move.
Moved by Mr. Borowski,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Voigt. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that also passes 4-0. So that concludes Section E, policy discussion and possible action. That takes us to our government relations discussion and information items. We have one item, which is a 2025 to 2027 state budget update. Dr. Sieber?
All right, thank you, Mr. Wad. So, not a ton to report, other than the governor gave his State of the State address on January 22nd, and it was in that address that he began to outline his budget priorities. He tagged 2025 as the year of the kid, in quotes. He said he's going to propose historic investments in K-12 education and meaningful investments in early childhood education, the University of Wisconsin system, and the technical college system. So to our earlier point, those are broken apart. He's also going to deliver his full budget address and announce his full budget proposal next week, so Tuesday, February 18th. So that should put us in a position, I think we talked about this last time, where we could break that down and begin discussing our collective legislative priorities going forward for the 25-27 budget at our March 10th committee meeting. So I'll provide some background in the packet for you for next month's meeting of some of the things that he's looking at, some of the things that we know the Joint Finance Committee is going to be looking at, and then maybe we can start to have a discussion in our group about some of the things that we want to advocate with when we maybe have an opportunity to present in front of our legislators, or having Senator Bradley be part of the Joint Finance Committee is a big opportunity for us. And then there might be opportunities too where we get to talk to the Joint Finance Committee if they're local, again, like they were last time at the Expo Center. So lots of different ways we can go about it.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sieber. Anyone have any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, that brings us to other business. Item 1, recommendations for future meetings. Mrs. Voigt?
I'm wondering if we're going to be taking a look at some of the bills as they're being introduced in the legislative process, ones that we would, that we've kind of encouraged them to consider doing, et cetera, that we could kind of follow and support those as they're going through the hearing and legislative process.
I think if it's part of I defer to Mr. Wad, but if it's part of the overall budget proposal and there's discussion going on in the Joint Finance Committee or at the legislative level, I would think that could be possible.
Yeah, I think it's important for this committee to be apprised of bills that will impact SDW as they're winding through the legislative process, or proposals that are being considered within the budget, so certainly, that makes sense.
That's great. Well, and similar to what Mr. Brooks often reminds us, like, that's why we have these relationships with our legislators, right? And we try to invite them in the summers, and we try to have that rapport. And some of these legislative priorities then allow us to talk with them, and then it allows them to reach out to us when they have questions about particular bills that are on the floor and say, what does that mean for the school district of Waukesha?
Yep, Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, and a perfect example of this actually happened last week. Senator Bradley and Representative Allen put out a bill related to school referendums and how, how the funding formula would impact us. So for example, I know this is something that we've talked about and Mr. Watt has talked about quite a bit, as well as when other school districts like MPS go to referendum, it pulls funding away from school districts like ours. And so they put out a bill for co-sponsorship last week that would kind of fix that portion of the formula. And I think a big portion of that, I mean, the fact that the two authors of the bill happen to be two people who represent our school district speaks volumes to just the ability to be able to communicate and have a good relationship with our local legislators.
Absolutely.
I noted that in the Saturday paper, but I was quite impressed, and thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, and I don't want to suggest that, these would not have been obvious to Representative Allen or Senator Bradley, but these are things we've talked directly with them about on their visits here. So I think that certainly demonstrates that we have their ear, and things that we advocate to them can lead their way to proposed legislation. And obviously, in my case, I hope passage. We'll see how it plays out, but, so yeah, that's a great point you brought up, Mr. Brooks. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other items for future business? All right, we have nothing else on the agenda, so with that, we will go ahead and adjourn. Before I officially adjourn, I will announce that our next Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting is Monday, March 10th, 2025, here in the boardroom at Blair. So, thanks, everyone. Have a great night.